live right now. Hello. Welcome. I do want to thank you for joining us for this presentation. This is the first time that Maverick Car Company has offered a how-to seminar, if you will, and the first time we have tried a live streaming event. So I hope you'll be patient with us. We were, just as we were preparing, talking about our various backgrounds. Austin and I'll introduce us in a second, are both at the dealership right now. We actually have some customers down there. I was going to go into our center office and have a nice window in my background, but I am now upstairs in the sort of unfinished section of Maverick. So I have a great background. Austin looks good. And then Sean, who I'll introduce here in a second too, was telling us about the artwork he has in his background for today's presentation, I think courtesy of his family. So, okay, we had the idea for this presentation, frankly, because of the coronavirus, or perhaps more accurately, how the coronavirus has impacted, us as a nation, a state, and individually. Some of our customers asked us how they could lower their automobile payments. And, they had a lot of reasons for this. Some were furloughed. The stay-at-home order, impacted their employer or their business. Others just wanted to have more room or margin in their finances. One customer wanted to apply for a new home loan and needed to shed a car payment. So we thought, given that we help folks lower automobile payments all of the time, that, we could share some of the ways that you can do it. And we tailored sort of our list of things to include, the techniques, if you will, to things that would make sense in the wake of COVID-19. Now, before I go too much further, I should introduce myself and the two gentlemen who are joining me for this presentation, and hopefully you can see their names right there on the screen. So my name is Armando Roggio. I have about 25 years of marketing and promotional experience. I've worked in some local companies you may know, including Micron Technology and D&B Supply, and I am now marketing for Maverick Car Company. And because I know how to run the live streaming software, I am here. Fortunately for you, I do have two subject matter experts with me. Austin has been part of Maverick Car Company's leadership team since shortly after their expansion, and as a finance manager, he works directly with clients to accomplish their purchase goals and with lenders to secure the best purchase options he can for Maverick's customers. Austin, please say hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Armando.
Yep. Sean manages the consignment program for Maverick Car Company. He has owned over 50 vehicles personally and knows a thing or two about trading up and trading down, buying and selling. And as an advocate for the customer or the consumer, Sean is always looking for ways to improve the Maverick client experience. And he genuinely loves what he does and loves working with people. Sean, say hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Armando.
Yep. Well, thank you guys for being present. A few minutes ago, Sean was asking if we could just do this another night. So I do thank you for being here, for knowing stuff, and for caring. I also wanted you, those watching us, to know what to expect from this presentation and discussion. So I put together this really fancy slide for you right here. We're going to go and try to touch on all of these topics in no more than about 20 minutes total, including the time that I'm taking right now to make these introductions and share this agenda with you. Trade down, that's moving from a relatively more expensive vehicle to a less expensive one. Refinancing, just like you would with a home mortgage, there's some lower rates possibly available out there. And then, you could sell an extra vehicle, which is the ultimate payment reducer, if you will. Okay. After our presentation, we do also want to take some questions that you might have. We're going to be saving about 10 minutes for those questions. So please do, chat them in right there along with the video as you think of them. And just know that we will be saving those probably until the end of the presentation. And I should say that the goal of this presentation is not to provide a definitive or comprehensive how-to guide for each of these payment lowering tactics. Rather, we're going to try to reintroduce you to each of these and provide you with enough information and insight to know if this is something that you want to pursue. And I said reintroduce because I don't expect this to be the first time that you've heard about trading down, which is just, again, trading your current vehicle for a less expensive car or truck. Nor do I think it's the first time that you thought about refinancing or selling. But instead, Austin, Sean, and I just hope to shine a little more light, if you will, on each of these topics. Okay. So moving along, I recently wrote a description of trading down for some social media posts that we did, and frankly, I think I did a decent job. Here's what I said. When you go from driving a relatively expensive vehicle, imagine a massive SUV with seating for a soccer team or a sports car that goes 0 to 60 faster than a speeding ticket, to cruising in a more practical sedan or truck, you are trading down. Austin, how'd I do? How would you define trading down for our audience?
Armando, I think you're spot on. There's a couple of different reasons why somebody might do that, but trading down is going to be moving from one model to another model. Handful of different reasons. An example: we had a client who traded down from an SUV that they had fully loaded. Originally purchased it for about a $70,000 price point, and wanted to get into something that didn't have as much of a load on their monthly budget. So I think a lot of times what people are thinking of when they're thinking trading down is they have to take a huge sacrifice. And while that might be the case, and that might be the best decision for me personally, in this case, that client was able to trade into something that had just as many features in it. We still were equipped with the leather and heating functions and sunroof and what a lot of folks were considering for the vehicle. So it wasn't the case for them. They just moved into something that was going to free up some finances for them.
So I want to talk a little bit about the ways trading down can lower automobile payments, because when I think about buying a vehicle, I often think about it as adding an expense, not reducing or lowering an expense. But in fact, it is possible to make a vehicle purchase and lower my monthly automobile expenses. Sean, would you mind getting us started? Talk to me about how trading down might reduce my monthly payments.
Absolutely. Well, before I get started, I wanted to let everyone know this is my first time on this live stream thing. So I did us all a favor and made some bullet points to try my best to stay on track. And I give Armando and Austin free reign on whipping me back into the line, so I stay on the on course. But yeah, absolutely. There's so much. When you first asked me if I would do this, I absolutely, I had 50 different ways to do so, and how simple trading down is. But then I realized in this current time, the COVID-19, how many people I know personally that it's affected, and kind of wanted to step back just a bit before I get into that and say, the thing that we're seeing is a lot of people wanting to trade their vehicles. They're, as Austin said, a $40,000 or $50,000 vehicle. This seems to be just a very common thing for a lesser vehicle. But then we're also running into people that have no pay for the last month, and it's overextended themselves. And so they're doing it from a practical standpoint, as opposed to just the money. It's like, hey, I'm stepping back. And I think that's something that we're good at helping people with. The reality is that every situation that we're seeing at this point in the dealership, people looking to do this, be it the person that came in and wanted to trade a Q5 in, but still needed all-wheel drive, and able to get into Forester. Yeah, they don't have the bells and whistles, but it's not permanent. And that's what we kept telling them. This isn't permanent. This is what you need. It's a need versus want right now. So really the big thing with trading down, I mean, there's, and I'll have Austin touch on this in a bit more, but it's of course the price, the number, like the price tag. If it's 40,000 and you're rolling your $40,000 vehicle into a 15 or 20, essentially your payment should be less. But there's so much that goes into that, because every situation is unique. How much money did you put down on your $40,000 vehicle? What do you owe on your $40,000 vehicle? So there's so much that goes into it, and rate, your interest rate, your term, all those come into play. And Austin could touch on that probably a bit more than myself.
Sure, and I think you hit on the big one. So price point is going to be one of the largest influences on what somebody's monthly obligation requirement is. And a great example of that, if you're purchasing a $100,000 home, typically you're going to have your monthly outgoing is going to be less than if you're purchasing a $300,000 home. That's a pretty easy one. A few other ones that are not necessarily directly related to lowering payments would be overall debt obligations. We have a handful of clients here that are new to the Treasure Valley. We see more people moving here. It's an influx. It's happening each day. And so for a lot of those folks, what their motivation is not necessarily going from one car payment to a lower car payment, their motivation is just to free up debt and reduce that expense from a $45,000 car down to a $25,000 obligation. Sean touched on a couple of things. Newer cars, of course, this may not be as much common knowledge as well. Newer cars will typically give you most flexibility on what you'd like to set up for your monthly payments, and also going to give you the most flexibility, or the most advantage, I should say, based on interest rates.
Austin, as you mentioned, interest rates, obviously, which is going to play an important part in our next payment lowering technique, refinancing. It made me think about the fact that, I guess, payments, et cetera, I guess I want to talk about one of the major concerns with trading down, which is negative equity or being upside down in my vehicle. Could you take a minute and describe negative equity, and is it a deal killer for trading down?
Sure. So negative equity, simply put, negative equity is owing this much on your car, more on your vehicle than what it is worth. And before I answer your question, I think I'll preface that with, I think the most common feeling that people have when they are in a negative equity position is feeling, oh my gosh, I'm the only one. And because we've done this for so long, I can very confidently say you're not. And we work with clients every day who are trading in vehicles that they own more than what we're able to value them at. And there's a handful of other things that are going to come into play with that. No, it's absolutely not a deal killer. And for the majority of the clients that we see, it's an absolute possibility. The big things is going to be a case-by-case scenario, and it's going to largely be on the shoulders of borrower history. But overall, I mean, you're able to make up for these things in a handful of different ways. When you're trading in negative equity and adding something on top of your loan, you can play around with some things to help alleviate that, and maybe even stay inside of your monthly budget or same monthly payment that you were having. There's also sales tax programs that come into play when you're trading the vehicle. In most states, you are able to utilize a sales tax saving to help eat away at a portion of that. Yeah, I think Sean would be able to add to a handful more things on that, but really case by case is going to be the big one, and largely depending on what you're trying to purchase, your current history, and maybe if you are a member of current credit unions or have great relationships with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say, just to kind of confirm, I guess, that the majority of folks that do come in, I would say it's probably more than 50% when trading a vehicle carry some negative equity. I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you from a consignment standpoint, I've had folks come in recently that are trying to get rid of that extra car or whatever it is, and same scenario. They have a car that they owe 33 on, and it's worth about 30. Not the end of the world. Fortunately, they had savings. They're okay, because in the end of it, it's going to cost them $3,000 to get rid of $30,000 in debt, or $33,000. So they're happy. But as Austin was saying, I truly believe that every one of those situations are case by case. I would love to say, hey, here's the magic formula, plug this in, and this is what it'll look like. That's just not the way it works. But we're happy to look at each and every individual's case. But one thing I would like to say, kind of from a personal standpoint and from things that I've learned, is take the time and step back and acknowledge and realize what got you in this situation to start with. Because much like our toilet paper shortage, I would say that people kind of jumped the gun and more or less freaked out. And it was like, oh, everyone's buying toilet paper, I'm going to buy it too. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that, hey, people are trading their cars or trading down. That may not be the absolute best, the best case for you, or the best, scenario for you. So really take a step back. And that's something that we're able to look at. Like, did you trade something in last time? What got you here? Let's figure that out, and then see how we can truly help you, like really help you going forward, and not just for the next 3 months, because 3 to 6 months is not long. Is this going to help you for a year, 2 years down the road? Like planning long-term, as opposed to this, well, right now my payment will be $100 less. Great. Unfortunately, it's $100 less, but it's for 84 months instead of the 60 you're at right now. So is it really less? And that's something just to kind of take into consideration. That's my thoughts on that.
It makes sense, and I like that you mentioned the toilet paper shortage, because we did think about a toilet paper promotion where you could get free toilet paper when you traded down. So I think that'd be good. But gentlemen,
it's not too late.
It's not too late. I told the folks watching that we would keep this initial discussion to about 20 minutes. So I do want to move on to refinancing. And with refinancing, I'm not getting a new or different vehicle, am I?
No, you're not. You may be getting a lower payment. And I mean, overall with refinance, it's similar to a mortgage. You're recalculating the terms, and that's as simple as it is. You're taking maybe a 15-year mortgage and turning it into a 30-year mortgage and turning it into it's the same thing with the car's terms. There's a lot of talk about interest rates, which I think is important. It's important to know what you qualify for. I believe that it's important to never pay too much, especially since banks have a lot bigger buildings than most of our homes. The honorable mentions that I make, though, is that that's not the only thing that's going to make up your home and make up your monthly payment. Oftentimes overlooked are the length of time that you're financing the car. And that's going to have the largest impact, along with price, on your monthly outgoing, your monthly payment on that car. The way that it works in the home business world and the mortgage world is 15-year is more money than a 3-year mortgage. I think that makes a lot of sense. Same with car payments. A 3-year loan term is going to be a larger payment than a 5-year loan term. And once you really get a grasp on that, I think it's important to recognize, why would I go with a 3-year instead of a 5? And those are going to be largely determined by who you're working with as the lender and their flexibility on that, but also the model year of your car. Newer cars qualify for better terms. That's the flexibility I was talking about earlier. That means that instead of being stuck with this 3-year, paying it off in 3 years and have to make this large payment, you may be able to stretch that out to 5. You may be able to stretch that out to 6, as long as 7-year loan terms that give you a lower monthly mandatory obligation. And you pay ahead as you like to. The government sends you money, or maybe you're jumping back to work, that sort of thing. The interest rates are lower, though, and I don't think that's something to ignore. Sean and I were talking about this one earlier too. You throw a rundown on that.
Yeah, no, well, that's what we were saying is, when you look at interest rates, especially for used cars or used vehicles, they're approaching, if not even hitting, I didn't verify this, but definitely coming close to an all-time low. And that's something that maybe I should verify, but I've seen rates in the low 2s, whatever it is. I mean, advertised, and I'm like, wow, that's insane, but it's awesome. At the same time, when you start talking about refinancing a vehicle, I don't think many people really do sit down and use a loan calculator, whatever it may be, but 2 or 3%, less, 2 or 3% less on a loan, on a refi could change drastically. Obviously, we know that on a home loan, but even on auto loans, and it's something that's worth people looking at, So,
well,
it's interesting. I was going to say, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Austin.
No, go ahead, Armando. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's interesting that you mentioned the 2 or 3%, because one of the things I learned as we were preparing for this presentation was that consumer auto loans, the loans we're discussing, are closely tied or related to the prime lending rate, which has come down a lot, as Sean mentioned. So last year, April of last year, the prime rate was 5.5%, meaning that folks with the best credit ratings were getting car loans at around that rate. And this year, right now, I checked this morning, the prime rate is 3.25%. And that's a huge difference. In fact, that's the couple of percentage points Sean was just talking about. So while we did talk about terms and other things, am I right that the fact, that interest rates are this low could make refinancing a good idea for some people right now?
Oh, absolutely. That's full circle on the conversation that we were talking about earlier this week. Even if you had bought a car earlier in 2020, even if you purchased a car recently in 2019, even if you've got great credit or nothing has changed, it's still a great idea to revisit that. And again, case by case scenario, you may have locked in the best terms at full swing, but oh my gosh, if you were leaving the opportunity to put $30, $40, $60, $100 a month back into your pocket, wouldn't you want to do that? There's a lot of talk about it. There's a lot of advertising for buying a brand new car in order to get great interest rates, but that's just not the case. A lot of times folks can go right back to their local credit union or even the lender that they're working with on their current vehicle and talk to them about the programs that they have. Now, that alone is going to make it worth it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and in regards to refinancing, I mean, there's a lot of things, kind of what I was talking about earlier. I know it's all case by case, and I'm going to say that probably throughout this entire conversation, just for the simple fact that there again, there's no algorithm that just says, hey, this is for you or this isn't for you. It's we got to talk to you and see your picture. But the other thing with refinancing is that you have the ability. We've all seen how quickly you can go from feeling pretty secure to feeling have a lot of uncertainty in life. So going through with the refinance, be it through us or whomever, looking at the idea of adding a warranty or service contract to that refinance, doing it at that lower interest rate, and just again, it's something where you can just essentially control what your outgoing is, and that's something that's really important to folks. There's times that like this that you can't control your incoming because things happen, but ultimately setting yourself up now for the future again by making sure you're protected so you don't have those $1,500 bills that come out of nowhere, so to speak, that you weren't expecting. Sure. So it's important.
Sure. One, if you really look at everything as far as we say incoming and outgoing, there's all sorts of verbiage out there in the world, but you have two different kinds of things that you're going to have in your life as far as ownership. And those are going to be assets. Assets make you money. And those are also going to be liabilities. Liabilities are things that cost you money. And an asset could be something that pays for your monthly expenses each and every month, right? Your job or your income, for instance, may be an asset to your family. But vehicles, cars always will be a liability. You're not just looking at the purchase price of the vehicle. We all know that we have to buy the car in the first place, but you're also touching a plethora of other things that you're going to pay for. Gasoline is one of those. We live in four-wheel drive country here, and that means that gasoline can be a huge expense for a lot of guys here. On top of that, insurance, you've got maybe monthly payments. You have maintenance on the vehicles, oil changes, brake pads. Largest thing is repairs with cars, and you don't get to, you'll get a check engine light or you'll get a bunch of things lighting up when everything is terribly wrong. But most of the time, you don't get a huge heads up on when something's going to happen. So having a vehicle service contract really is just protecting your budget. Same as making sure that, just like anything else that we'll probably plan for in our life, if you wagered out $400 for something, oh my gosh, is it going to feel uncomfortable when we start paying $600 and $700 and $800 for that thing that we just budgeted $400 for? And vehicle service contract just does exactly, simply put, to your point, Sean, does exactly that. It takes care of the repair. You have a copay or a deductible, if you will, and gets the vehicle back on the road.
Yeah. No, and to even add to that, the idea of doing even the prepaid maintenance, and there's a lot of who's out there to offer that, and it's something as simple as if you're prepaying for, and that could go into a refi as well, but having your oil changes, your tire rotations, all your basic maintenance taken care of. And what we found in the times that we do this is that people that pay for it, they use it. And they typically, if your car's, it's like going to the dentist or doctor. I'll use a dentist because I recently started going to the dentist more religiously. And all of a sudden, you don't have these big surprises. It's like, hey, I had a cavity starting, but not bad enough for a feeling. Same idea. If you're getting your car serviced, it's essentially you're going to have an idea of something's going on. Hey, you know what? Next time you're in here, we're probably going to need to look at tires, but it's not a surprise. Hey, you got a belt showing on the inside. Again, it's not a surprise. And I think that with everything that this happened, if I could go back and say anything, is just preparing yourself. And these are all things that we all know we need to do, but they're not on the forefront of everyone's mind. And so I think it's important for people to realize, hey, during this reset, what can I do to stabilize myself, my family, my budget? And this is a really good way to go about that.
Makes sense. I am watching the clock a little bit, and so I'm just going to try to sum up as we move on. So interest rates are low right now. You have lots of term options, and when you refinance, you can not only lower your car or truck payment, but you might be able to protect your budget, if you will, with a service contract or with prepaid maintenance. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
All right. You're both nodding. That's good. So let's move on to the last section. So back all the way back in 2017, the U.S. Department of Transportation released some figures or data around how many cars and trucks there are in the United States. And this is actually the most recent data available. And it showed that a typical American household had 1.88 light passenger vehicles. So unless that is counting my son's broken down Isuzu as a 0.88 of a vehicle, what it really means is that many families have more than one car. And that is particularly true here in Idaho. Okay, you can see that. That very same data showed that for every 1,000 men, women, and children in the state of Idaho, there are 1,122 vehicles. Again, that means that many families have 2 or 3 cars. And frankly, selling one of those is the ultimate form of car payment reduction. Sean, if I want to sell my car, what are my options?
Well, I'd say your top 3 answers or options, I should say, would be sell it to a dealer, sell it private party, Craigslist, Facebook, the old sign in the road on the side of the highway, or you can sell it via consignment, which is, I think, new for a lot of folks. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a few, but I guess we'll just go through each one of these and maybe give the upsides and maybe some things to caution you on as you do them or consider them, I should say. Selling to a dealer, I feel, is probably the quickest. I mean, it just essentially is. You pull up whichever dealership you choose, a few different ideally, and you say, hey, I would like to sell my car. They typically could cut you a check the same day and you're done. Now, downside to that is you're probably going to get less than you wanted. And to be fair, as someone that buys vehicles from people at times, you have to understand that depending on the vehicle, that dealership is then taking on all responsibility for that, the reconditioning, the condition, total mechanical condition of the vehicle, and then has that again as a liability, now has to sell that vehicle as well. So there's no guarantee on return or when the return is going to come. So I think keeping that in mind, but ultimately that's a way to really quickly get rid of a car. Again, going back to what I said earlier, I believe this comes down to it's situation by situation. If you're someone, hey, I needed to get $10,000 today because XYZ, I own my car outright, that might be your best bet. But I think there are better options out there for folks. Private party is, one that I think would probably be a better option to at least try prior to doing that. But that's kind of my take on it. Austin, what do you think?
I think you're spot on too. Private party for at least in Idaho's Northwest market is going to make a lot of sense to people. We have a lot of clients who've tried to sell things private party. They either had bites on it or they didn't. And then they move forward accordingly. I think the most important thing is again, going back to the things that you've touched on, Sean, being honest with yourself about your situation. If it doesn't affect you and it's not going to impact your life and your day-to-day operations and your family and your overall lifestyle, your well-being, to carry that liability to try to sell that car on your own, then do. And if it is, be honest with yourself about that too. Where are you going to be at in 2 weeks if this doesn't sell? Is your lifestyle going to change? Dealers, of course, they're going to take a car in. Their goal is to recondition it and make it presentable, advertise it, and they've got to pay for that advertising and sell it for a profit. So naturally, there's going to be a margin that they need to build in order to do what essentially you're trying to do. So again, being honest with yourself. If you're at high risk or really don't want to be outside of your home right now, maybe having a bunch of people coming over to drive your car doesn't make sense. But for most of the people that we work with, at least giving it a run for a couple of weeks can, and it absolutely has a lot of people. Yeah,
and consignment. So Armando, I mean, as you mentioned earlier on, I manage our consignment department here at Maverick. But truth be told, I used the program as a consumer client prior to actually running the program. And I can tell you that it worked and it worked well. And that's not a sales pitch. I'm just letting folks know that ultimately it's kind of that, I guess you could say, middle ground. And it's not for every vehicle, but ultimately if you have a vehicle, and what we find is when people start breaking that $10,000, $15,000 range and you're getting above that, trying to sell that on your own is tough. Not very many people have that cash in hand. And we're able to offer all the payment options. We're able to do financing on the spot, and we're able to get folks in the car. And what that looks like from the consumer or the individual consigning the vehicle is they're going to ideally try to get closer to that private party number. So they're still getting what they're wanting to get without having to answer the calls, answer the emails, meet people at Walmart parking lots or wherever it is they want to meet them, depending on who called and how they called them and so on and so forth. But ultimately, I think the consignment program or a consignment program works really well for most situations. And I've encouraged folks in past, said, hey, try it for a few weeks on your own, private party, and if it's not what you want to do and it's not working, give us a call. And it's been good. It's been a good way. So those are really the main three ways that come to mind. And we could probably go into consignment a bit more detail, but I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. And Sean Austin, we have gone a bit over our 20 minutes, like 10 minutes over that we'd allotted for this discussion. So I do want to move on to the questions, but I do also need to take a minute and reiterate what we've discussed so far. So our goal was to reintroduce you, those watching, to three ways that you can lower your monthly automobile payments. And our suggestions were to trade down to a less expensive vehicle, refinance the vehicle you're driving now, and perhaps even protect your budget with a service contract or prepaid maintenance. And then number three, sell an extra vehicle, maybe consigning it to get the ultimate form of payment reduction. Okay, so with that, I do want to read some of our questions. We've had a couple come in. The very first one I want to tackle is from Bill. And Bill says, I have an expensive SUV, would like to downgrade, but I don't want an old, unreliable car. Are there good cars that are less expensive? Any suggestions?
Sean, I'll start on this one. I'm sure you've got thoughts to share as well. Rewinding to reliability really is going to be based on a couple of things. We live in a world that we're so fortunate to be able to do some research or at least have access to information that are going to give us some insight. And those don't have to come from dealerships anymore. They oftentimes do, because that's what we're immersed in. That's what we do every single day. The information out there, though, a lot of times from Consumer Reports, for instance, is going to come from people who own that car and how's their experience been. So first and foremost, doing a little bit of research on what it is you're looking to replace that with. And second part of that is doing business with a reputable place. If you're not going to go out and seek out a vehicle for yourself, if you're not going to go out private party and try to purchase something, then working with a dealership or business, or maybe even with a mechanic that is reputable, and give you an honest rundown of what I don't believe in today's world with as many options we have out there that trading down ever means having to sacrifice, necessarily having to sacrifice reliability. Sean, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree. And again, I keep defaulting to the situation by situation, but my first questions would be, well, why the larger SUV? Is that something that, do you need a Sequoia? Do you need a Yukon XL? Is it family related? Is it, hey, I'm towing my boat and I like to have enough space for my stuff? So I think a lot of that would come down to the questions. But to touch on what Austin was saying, I don't think you have to sacrifice reliability. But I do think there are ways to go about that. Again, Consumer Reports, looking at vehicles, having inspections done, third-party inspections, and to be able to confirm the mechanical condition of the vehicle you're looking at. But I would want to ask Bill a few questions, just to clarifying questions, to really figure out what he's looking for, see if we can point him in the right direction.
I do understand that, and talking to Bill or anyone would help you identify the specific needs for the vehicle, and you could put them in something reliable. But I also want to help Bill out here on this chat. So if you were looking at a vehicle, he's coming from an SUV, what are some vehicles that you might recommend? He says the expensive SUV. I mean, are we talking about a 4Runner? Are we talking about going all the way to a Subaru? What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it. I mean, again, it's tough because I can appreciate that. But yeah, what's he driving? Expensive SUVs? He driving an Escalade? No, because there's a lot of. And do you need the third row? So then a lot of different SUVs come to mind. But I'll always say, I'm not sponsored by them yet, but I'll always say Toyota. Anything, can't really go wrong. So anything Toyota, Honda. Again, I would need to know more about what exactly he's doing with it. Is it a commuter? Is it round town? But any of those vehicles work. Any Toyota 4Runner with the third row, if that's what's needed. Gosh, Honda Pilot. Does he need as big as the Sequoia? I'm not sure, but there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, big time. And to add on, touch on a point that we were making earlier, I think some of the most reliable vehicles out there on the road are the ones that other people pay to fix, that service contract companies pay to fix. Even if a vehicle is coming up on 100,000 mile mark, maybe it's less than that, maybe it's just barely out of manufacturer's warranty at 60. Having a service contract in a car a lot of times alleviates that concern overall. If you've got your maintenance taken care of and you're coming back to the dealership to hopefully prevent problems from happening, and you have a service contract to cover it if everything does go wrong, and you're just that lucky person, it still is going to alleviate that stress, and you're not going to come out of pocket for large expenses, and you're going to guaranteed go back to a certified shop, a certified center to get those repairs done, and maybe not sacrifice for a budget repair out of somebody's backyard that might only last a couple of months.
All right, I'm going to go on with that to our next question. Is there an age limit on what I'm able to refinance? My car was older when I got it a couple of years ago, and I had a hard time finding finances. How about older cars and refinancing, gentlemen?
Oh, that's a fun one. In my experience, every bank is going to be a little bit different with that. First and foremost is how old is old, and how many miles do you have on that car as well? I've seen cars that were only a handful of years old that had over 200,000 miles on them. And it's going to be hard to refinance no matter what you do. If you do have a good relationship with your lender, I think that's the very first place to start. If you maybe don't have a relationship with them, or maybe you've never done anything but just made payments with them, visit the dealership that you purchased it from, or somebody else that you feel comfortable going to. Dealers do have refinance programs. They do push more volume than you do. Guaranteed. I process more auto loans every single week than you probably had in a lifetime. So we are able to leverage that, and a lot of other auto groups are able to leverage that in order to get better terms for their clients and pass along another good relationship, piggyback off of that relationship. Specific answers. Bank programs going back as far as 2003 on my side. I have some lenders who don't even specify on you, and they look at things as a case-by-case scenario as well. So a handful of different ways to do it. I think being informed and going direct to get that information rather than speculation.
And just so I can say that again, so basically you said, some lenders will go case by case even if it's older, but you definitely have a 17-year-old vehicle that you could get refinanced. Is that what I heard you say, Austin?
On my side, I'm going to be limited all the way to 2010 for a refinance to the dealership, but individuals out there can go into certain credit unions even here in Boise that'll finance all the way and refinance all the way back to 2003. Yes.
Okay. I guess this might actually be a little bit of prognostication, and I don't know if you want to do that or not, but obviously this is a live stream on May the 5th, 2020. In the state of Idaho, we're just starting to open up some businesses again after a lockdown, and there's a lot of people already saying that we're coming into a recession. Do you think we're going to see an increased tightness, if you will, in the auto loan market? So is it a good time now if you need to trade down, if you need to refinance, to do that in anticipation of maybe a little bit tightening in market, or do you not see that as being an issue or a concern, either one of you?
Well, I'll say this just real quick, and I can't speak to for the auto industry, but I could say I've got a good source that in home loans, there's definitely some tightening down on cash out refis and things of that nature. So I wouldn't be surprised if it trickled over into auto, but I don't know if Austin's seen that or if it's something that he has any insight on at all.
Sure. I think in times of plenty, everybody's a little bit more relaxed, and in times that are tighter, people typically get more frugal, and banks are not an exception to that. Dealers may not be an exception to that. Here's what I can say we do see. First and foremost, vehicles out there that are sitting on dealerships lots, they own those cars, they pay for those vehicles. and guaranteed they do not want to have them there. They'd rather you have them at your home. So that's going to be a huge motivating factor right now to, yes, absolutely pull the plug on something or make a move on something before we ever get there. And I think it's difficult to predict what the market's going to do in 3, 6, and 9 weeks down the road, let alone 3, 6, and 9 months down the road. But what we do know is auto loans are pretty well the most flexible and the best interest rates that you're going to get. Vehicles sitting on dealership lots are incredibly aggressively priced, and there's a surplus of vehicles that are going through auction, and they keep getting running over and over and over again without having purchases on them, and that's because dealerships or individuals who are running them want to get this price for them, and they're only being bidded up to this amount. So that means that potentially the market's going to be even going up from here. So yeah, absolutely a good time to at least look into it and look into what options that you have, and decide if it makes sense for you to pull the trigger on something right now.
Awesome. Hey, once again, I do want to thank you for joining us for this presentation. Those of you watching, I mentioned at the beginning of this is our first attempt at a how-to presentation and our first attempt at live streaming. So I hope it was helpful to you and valuable to you. Please let us know if you like this presentation. If you happen to be watching on YouTube, subscribe, leave a comment, anywhere you watch it. If you wouldn't mind, send a text message to this number and tell us, how we did. You could start it off by saying, presentation, and, then let us have it. Were we terrible? Were we good? What else would you like to see as we do future presentations? Because we're going to try to do these on a regular basis. So thank you to everyone who has been watching. Sean and Austin, thank you for participating in this. This is new for you, I know, and really enjoyed having you guys on.
Well, thank you, Armando, very much. It was awesome.
Likewise, I really appreciate you guys.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks again. Have a very good night.